Howdy. Welcome back to Dion Talk. We're going to see a lot of videos that talk about how much rents are coming down. And similar to how we're going to see how many videos talk about the housing crash, you're actually going to start to see videos that talk about home prices down 50%. And to explain that really quick, at the peak, year over year from last year, market-wide, so nationwide, we're not looking at our local area because each one can be a little bit different. We've seen an increase of, at the peak, 14% year over year from last year to this year. Well, now we're sitting at 7% up year over year. So you're going to see videos that say home prices are down 50%. That's a play on words that got your attention and get most of us to click on the video.
Okay.
This video, I'm actually going to talk about are rents coming down. And I know what's going on in my local market, but I only invest in 2 counties. I have Dana, the CEO of Hemlane, who has a system where she interacts with over 3,000 property owners, who has over 18,000 rentals in her system, and I think has a better feel for what's going on with rents. So Dana, are you seeing rents come down?
So the one-liner is absolutely not. We have seen renewals. Some renewals just renew at the same exact rate. I have not seen, out of 18,500 rentals that we have, that they have actually decreased the rent. And this is across the nation. Even in California, where I am, where there's a max exodus and they're leaving California, I still have not seen those rental rates go down even today. And I think this clickbait is a really important thing, because we also saw that during COVID, where it was like, all these tenants aren't paying their rent. And it was all of this headline news that was massaging the data and reporting in a way that they wanted that to be clickbait. But you are correct. Out of our 18,500 units, I have not seen one where when they are at that renewal, they are reducing the price, or when they put it back on the market. There may be some exceptions where it's like a luxury property or some sort of anomaly, but like mass market, they're not putting rental rates down. There's also a seasonality factor. So when you think about it, like we're in October and November, obviously the rental rates of what you can demand and rent for a single family home might be, if it's going back on market, slightly lower than what you would see in June and July, when that's when families are moving. That has nothing to do with the market or an indication on the market. That's just a seasonality trend that people need to be mindful of. And so, yeah, I'm not seeing them go down. There's 44 million rental households out there. Those renters still need a place to live. And so I'm not seeing it go down. Now, in some areas, it's going up more. In some areas, it's not going up as much because it was a high cost market. With remote work, people are maybe choosing to live a little bit farther away from the city center, but I'm not seeing rental rates drop at all.
I love that it is across the board, and it's because of how you look at the data. If somebody said, I looked on Zillow and I saw a property for rent at this amount, and 2 weeks later it was at a lower amount, that is not rent going down. That is not a renewal. That is not somebody saying, hey, for you to continue renting my property, you're going to pay less. That is somebody who thought, I think this is what rents are. I'm going to try to get this number, and overshot. Like home prices. I've seen properties like where in the last 2 months, there's been 4 price reductions. That's not property prices coming down. That's somebody who had a wish list price who didn't sell because they didn't recognize the swing from a seller's market to the buyer's market that we're moving towards. And the great thing about moving into a buyer's market is everybody says, when it's a buyer's market, I will buy. Well, it's a buyer's market because nobody wants to buy. They killed demand, which made it a buyer's market. It's that way with rents too. We're going to see rents coming down if you watch the data on the websites where rents are listed. But that's from their wish list price for rents, just like a home price that was set too high on a number that people hoped they would get.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. We even tell real estate investors that Hemlane, if they want to get a certain price and we see that it's above market rate, a lot of times they're not going to listen to us. They're like, this is the price I think that I'm going to get. So we tell them, put it on market, advertise it everywhere to 30 rental listing websites. And then in 1 to 2 days, if you don't have any leads and you know your listing's at the top, because when you first list your property, they're like hot new listing that's at the top. if you don't have any tenant inquiries, you know your price too high and you need to bring it down. And so I think you're right. People are testing the market of how much they can get. But that is not an indication. Like renewals is a better indication of our rents going down. And we are not seeing today that renewal rates are going down. What we are seeing is owners knowing that with inflation, prices are going up of consumer goods. So tenants are more cost burdened by inflation because their salaries only went up 4.9%, I think is what the Consensus Bureau said. Meanwhile, inflation was, 7 to 11% based on the month and based on, who's telling you what they really think inflation is based on what's reported. And in that particular case, tenants are more cost burdened. If the price of goods is going up, but their their salaries aren't going up as much. So I think there's a lot of landlords who are saying, hey, for me, vacancy will cost me more. So Dion, I'm going to just keep your rent at the current rate. But we're not seeing rates decrease because they know that if that tenant goes and moves out, they're going to have an increase in their rent if they go back to the market. So we haven't seen that happen yet. We're not predicting for that to happen for the rest of the year, that those rental rates would go down.
So what I wanted to do was get your input with your background and your experience before I kind of colored it with my two ideas from my personal opinion on why rents are not coming down and why I agree with you that while even I'm doing some renewals this year without a rent increase, because last year I used the binder strategy and had my tenants request a 20 to 28% rent increase across the board. And so that will carry me through the next year with a good profit margin. And if you're familiar with my content, you've heard me say this before. So someday rents may come down.
But not today.
Since we've started tracking the data in 1914, there has not been a 5-year period where rents have ever gone down once market-wide. Not even in the 2008 housing crash, not during COVID, not during the Great Depression. There are some local markets where rents can go down. If you have car manufacturers move away from Detroit, that market can crash. If you have the .com crash hit Silicon Valley harder than everywhere else, that market can crash. But market-wide, we've never seen the rents come down. When you start to see videos that say rents are coming down because they're not going up as fast as they were, it's the same as people saying home prices are coming down because they're not going up as fast as they were. For me, it's always important that when you're looking to run the numbers on purchasing a property, that we don't count on rent increase. And we run our numbers a little bit lower than market average of what they are currently. I also invest and diversify my portfolio, expecting a 50% rent decrease without having to go back to work. So while I invest like I'm expecting a rent decrease, I don't see one coming, because here's a couple of things that will kind of play off of what you've said, Dana. People are only getting a 4 to 7% wage increase. But what we're seeing this year is called the Great Resignation. Over 4 million people each month have quit their job for 12 months consecutively, but unemployment is under 4%. That means they're not quitting their jobs and becoming unemployed. They're quitting their jobs and moving companies, which often gets you a much larger pay increase than staying at a company and getting a cost of living increase. The other thing that there is kind of a flaw with is the affordability index, where people say the median income in an area can afford the median priced house, and then it goes up or down based on the affordability index. That completely ignores the fact that remote work is now more an option than at any point in history. In 2020, we shut the world down and we told everybody, if you can, you're going to continue working from home. And a lot of people are still doing that. There are companies like Pinterest who paid $89 million to break a lease in San Francisco and then gave $20,000 to staff to say, continue working from home. We're not coming back to the office. There are companies like Tesla that said, come back to work in the office or you're fired. So it's gone a little bit both ways. But right now, you could 2 years ago had to live in a city like Seattle or New York, where rent was $3,000 or $4,000 for a tiny little apartment. Now you can move, nobody would want to, but you can move to Gary, Indiana and buy a house, and your payment is less than $1,000 and have 3-4 times the size of the apartment you had, because now we can work remotely. People working remotely but not sure if they're going to be called back to the office or not is going to increase rental demand outside of major cities where the work is located. While some markets might go down, you might be in that market. Feel free in the comments to say, in my market, rents have gone down however much percent. In my market, like Dana said, I'm excited if a tenant doesn't want to renew the lease. Tenant turnover is usually one of the most expensive things an owner deals with. But the rent increase is over 40% right now if a tenant moves out.
Yeah, I think you're 100% correct. I mean, in some markets, we'll see the rent increase to be slightly less, 1 to 2%. But if you think of 12 months ago, rents are still up 7%. And so even if your tenant moves out, in some markets, you'll be like, oh, okay, maybe I can only increase it 1 to 2% because I was in a really high cost city. Other ones you can say, I can increase it 40%. And so I couldn't agree more with you on that. That, in market, there will be changes in the market based on seasonality and based on where you are located. And is this an attractive place where a lot of tenants are moving? But other than that, we're not seeing prices slashed for current tenants renegotiation of these renewals. If anything, we're seeing landlords have a big heart and say, hey, for you, we are going to keep it flat. You've been a fantastic tenant. And it also benefits the landlord because they don't have to go through a turnover in many cases.
So in May of 2021, I purchased a duplex. 2 months later, I used my binder strategy on the tenants. So they were paying 11 something. Rent ended up being $14.60. So the tenants asked for a little over a $300 a month increase to their rent because area average rents were around $1,600. In June of 2022, I had a tenant purchased a house and moved out. So I didn't have to use the binder strategy. But when I used the strategy to find out what the area average rents were, I set that rent at $2,000 for the same sized unit in the same area and had multiple applicants. In 1 year, rents went up that much. So I don't know that we would see them go up again that much next year. But when they don't go up as fast, that doesn't mean they're coming down.
Couldn't agree more with you, Dion.
Well, thanks, Dana. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, and you want to reach out to Dana, you can find her at hemlane.com. And if you want to use the property management software that she is the CEO of the company for, you can use Dion as a code to get a discount on your first year.
Great. Thanks, Dion, for having me. And for all of you listening, you get a 1 month free trial at hemlane.com. And just make sure that you mention you came from Dion. As you mentioned, you get 20% off your first year.
Thank you very much, Dana.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Until my next video, thanks for coming to my Dion Talk.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.